Okay, Steve, what was going on in the market this week?
Well, the market is said to climb a wall of worry, and there's a lot to worry about, I think. I know I sound like a broken record, but on the S&P at 1344, we've hit that level about 8 times, and we failed to get above and stay above it. And on the bottom, I'd say about 1260. I know that sounds like mumble jumble, but if we break either of these, if we go above 1344 or break below 1260, then I think that's going to be the direction that we might head for a while. And I use strategies where I seek to protect my client's downside, and folks can talk to me on a one-on-one basis by going to my website, steveossie.com, sign up for my newsletter. It just keeps getting deeper in Europe. The regulators just completed stress tests on the banks there in Europe.
What is a stress test? I'm not sure I know what that is.
Yeah, they try to determine how a bank would respond during a recession. They look at their loans, their cash reserves. They see how the banks would survive in various scenarios. And each Friday here, the Feds in America see several banks because they've gone under. So during the stress test, they try to see if the banks over there would survive. And during this test, 8 failed and 16 barely passed. And some say those tests weren't rigorous enough because they didn't factor in the likelihood that Greece and other countries might default.
Is that a good number? 8 failed? I mean, half failed and 8 barely passed, but they passed. Is that pretty regular or no?
You know, what I should have remembered is how many banks in total there were, but I think the point is that they're going to have to require higher reserves and other things to make sure that if they do go into a full-on recession, they can survive. Since we last talked, Portugal was downgraded, I think, and concern now for Spain. So the whole debt problem in Europe has had the market worried for many months, and there's really no good news coming out of there. And we're going through the same thing here with our own debt ceiling issues.
I can't keep up with all the news on the debt ceiling. Where are we now, Steve?
Yeah, we face the chance that we may default on our debt if the folks in D.C. can't agree on a deal with our debt ceiling. Now, if we've reached the limit of our borrowing by law, we impose our own credit limit on ourselves, or the legislature does, and that debt ceiling has been reached, and so the government needs to borrow more money to pay its bills come August 2nd. And if we can't pay our bills, our credit rating will drop just like in our personal lives, and the government will have to pay higher interest to borrow money because of its lower credit score. And already our debt is a huge percentage of our government spending. We have $14 trillion in debt, so you can only imagine how much interest that we pay. And if we have to pay more because our credit rating is lower, it's only going to stress our budget even more. So the folks have to deal with something by August 2nd.
Well, it's certainly not going to look good if we default. Not going to look good to the world, and our government checks are not going to go out. I mean, that's ridiculous. We can't do that.
A lot of ramifications. We might not hold the reserve currency. We just won't be looked at in the same light we had before. I think of the folks in Greece, and we see those images of them rioting and burning things and turning over cars, and I can better understand where they come from, and I hope America doesn't get to that point. But the government, with its big spending and corruption, ran up a huge debt. And now the people have to pay for it with austerity, higher taxes, change in entitlements, and things like retirement age and health care. And the American people didn't get us into $14 trillion of debt. The politicians have. And we should look with a good deal of concern at what's going on in Europe, because we may be looking in our short-term future.
And I think it's crazy for the government to put our backs up against the wall, and we have to come out fighting, and it's the only way to get things done.
Yes,
Well, the president, he's been on TV a lot this week, and I really haven't heard him say anything. He's kind of like a scolding teacher.
I agree. He's acting like he's a leader, but in my opinion, he's not. He lectures Congress to take action and get things done, but he's murky on what he really wants done. And he keeps focusing on this corporate jet thing, which just drives me nuts every time he brings it up. Paul Ryan said on that program recently that the loophole about corporate jets and other tax benefits was reauthorized by Obama in 2009 in the stimulus package. So he's giving these benefits. No Republicans voted for that in the first place, and it takes some guts to blame your opponent for legislation that you passed yourself. And then Obama goes off and flies on Air Force One, paid for by you and I.
Yeah.
If he doesn't think CEOs should fly on corporate jets, sell Air Force One like Sarah Palin sold Alaska's jet and fly Southwest. I just don't think he cares so much about debt reduction as having his press conferences, and he's just using it as a campaign platform.
Well, you know, you hear mostly about the Republicans in the House, and we know that they have the majority, but what do they want?
Well, especially with the Tea Party influence, they don't want to raise the deficit without agreeing to make corresponding cuts in spending. They don't want higher taxes, and they want a balanced budget, which means that you don't spend more than you take in. It would take a two-thirds vote in both houses for a constitutional amendment, and the states would have to ratify it. I hear there's about 5 different deals, but the one that seems to be popular going into the weekend is one where the Republicans will vote on it next Tuesday. They'll raise the debt ceiling $2.4 trillion with matching cuts in spending and guidelines to curb future spending. But Obama says he won't pass that without raising tax revenues. And businesses say revenues, but it really just means raising taxes. I realize not a lot of our listeners make more than $250,000 a year, but I don't really call that rich. Of course, I'm in Incline Village, so maybe that makes some sense.
I was going to say that.
Beat you to it. In large part, those are small business owners, and they really drive our economy. And to raise their taxes will hurt businesses. All that uncertainty is part of why unemployment's 9.2%, because why are people going out to hire when they don't know what the tax structure will be? And I don't think you raise taxes when the economy is weak. I would perhaps be okay for raising taxes on folks like you that make over $1 million a year.
I agree.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm willing.
But they say if you draw the line that high, you just can't raise enough new tax revenue to take care of the problem. So they got to swoop in on the middle class, too, and raise their taxes.
Well, and at $250K a year, that's going to bring that class of people more down to the middle class. I don't see that doing any benefits.
I agree with you, yes.
So what's the plan? Letting the president do whatever he wants? And isn't that really the job of Congress? I'm not understanding this.
I don't understand the plan. It's called the McConnell Plan, and it's supported by Harry Reid.
Yeah.
And they want to allow Congress to surrender their power over the budget to the president and let the president raise the debt ceiling. And if he comes up with a plan that they don't like, they can stop it by a 2/3 vote. But Senator DeMint says the Republicans weren't elected to make it easier for government to spend. But this way, the debt ceiling could be raised. The president would have to take the political consequences. I think they just want to get rid of a hot potato. It doesn't solve the deficit problem, but it might avert Armageddon if just nothing else happens.
Well, and they're not agreeing with him now. What's going to make them think they agree with how high he's going to raise it? That's crazy.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, now I hear about the cut, cap, and balance. Tell me a little bit about that.
I like the plan. That's the House Majority Leader Eric Cantor and others that promote this. It's supported by most of the conservative members. Folks think the way I do. Spending cuts mean little in D.C. because they can always cut expenses now but then raise them just a little bit later. So they want cuts, yes, but they also want to cap spending, which might limit the amount that government can spend based on, for example, maybe GDP. And then also the balance parts to balance the budget.
Well, we hear about the GDP, but what is that exactly?
GDP is a gross domestic product.
Okay.
What it means exactly involves too many factors that I don't remember, but it's essentially the total of all the goods and the services produced in the country. So it's the total sales of all the hamburgers and airplanes and products and things that we do. And we produce less, and when the economy is doing better, the GDP rises. So if we capped spending to GDP, when the economy is doing well, we could absorb more government spending. When the economy is not doing well, they would be forced to spend less. And the House conservatives want to cap it at 18% of GDP, which is an average over the last several decades. So in summary, I agree with Charles Krautheimer, who was in the Washington Post, I think today. He said, let's pass a short-term debt ceiling like $500 billion with $500 billion in budget cuts. That would give them enough money to get over the hump for a while and give them another 5 months or so to really do this thing right and to do something big.
So what do you think is the likelihood of that or a combination of those things happening?
You know, there's been so many plans with so many things thrown out. I have no clue which one's going to finally stick. The one that we talked about where we just let the president raise it and let him take the consequences might avoid Armageddon, and then he would take the heat. I don't know.
Yeah, and then we'd have a good big bonfire right on the Capitol grounds.
Yes, indeed. We'll probably know more next week because they have to get this thing in soon.
Yeah.
Because while the deadline is August 2nd, it's going to take time to implement all this stuff.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all that, Steve. If you would like some solid advice on your portfolio or some more information from our financial guru, Steve Ossie, go to his website at steveossie.com.
Yes, thanks, Jay.
Thank you. Have a great week.